Sid, Sid N. Also, we have two Sids on the panel, and I will be saying Sid N and Sid D. I'm not being rude. I'm just trying to be distinguished between them.
Sounds good. Everybody can mic'd up.
We can hear you.
All right.
All right, Sid.
Sid Nayar. I work for Freshworks. It's not a grocery company. We sell enterprise software in a very uncomplicated way to just not the Fortune 500, but to Fortune 5 million. My role is driving HR strategy, transformation, as well as talent. Very excited to be here.
Thank you.
Awesome. My name is Kelly McMahon. I am the Vice President of Organizational Effectiveness at Equinix, not Equinox. We are the world's leading digital infrastructure provider.
Thank you.
I am Sid Deka. I'm the head of HR for one of Oracle's leading businesses, SaaS businesses. So Oracle, as you know, is one of our large cloud computing businesses, from autonomous databases to AI-powered apps to all the cloud solutions that we provide. We are 140,000 employees globally, and I just manage a small part of it from an HR perspective.
Awesome. And I'm Carol MacKinlay. I'm the CHRO at Velocity Global. We are an employer of record company, so we employ your employees when you can't or are moving fast or just decide you don't want to have an entity in a particular country. So my perspective here today is I'm representing my own employees, but I'm representing yours too. And so I'm going to try and mix my thoughts into that of how we represent you best too. So.
Okay, thank you. That's great. So let's dive right in. Carol, you want to start talking? Let's talk about first, just very briefly, what's one key driver of engagement and fulfillment at your organization?
Yeah, and so I always go back to the tried and true, which is empathy. I think we tend to get into operationalizing and doging things sometimes, and we forget about the human being in the group and making sure that we're acting as an ombudsman and that we are making sure that employees are having the best experience while they're there working for us and getting the best out of them. And so that is the flag that I carry.
Thank you. Sid.
Yeah, we're not talking about pizza party and how successful those are, right? So,
we will hold that till later.
Yes. Okay, so from my perspective, like what we've seen work a lot is the growth mindset culture, right? Building that throughout, the vein of the organization, where we're promoting, continuous learning, right? Providing the safe space for employees to be able to experiment and continue to kind of drive innovation, right? And at the same time, owning their own career in their hands instead of somebody always wanting to kind of do something for them. So I think that really helps.
Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it starts with strategic alignment, right? And we're going through some of this effort right now, in sort of a refresh on the strategy is just, do we understand where we're going and why? And does every employee understand how their work meaningfully contributes to that, right? And makes a difference ultimately in sort of our enterprise effort.
Yeah, I'll actually build on that. For us, it's clarity of purpose, and it's extreme transparency with our employees.
I'm sorry, repeat the second one?
Extreme transparency with our employees.
Okay.
So I think that's a big focus.
It's nice that you've all given different key drivers. So let's talk about how these drivers are structured in your organization and what programs do you have around them and how they work. And then we can touch a little bit on the benefits as well. Yeah. Do you want to start? Because
Sure. So I'll talk about transparency. So we have a new CEO that sort of took over about 9 months ago. And that's brought a big shift in the organization. And the first thing they did is actually present a strategy. And for our company, that was very refreshing because there was no articulation of one strategy. And with that, I think what we've been doing is being very transparent through different forums at all levels globally about what that strategy is, what do we require from our organization in terms of behaviors to adapt to that strategy, and how do we look at incentives to drive behavior against those. So those are some of the things that we are doing.
I'll maybe build on you again. I feel like we have a bit of a tag team going. Yeah, so I mean, as it relates to strategic alignment, I think right now, we've had the great fortune of growing so fast that when you think about just sort of the implementation of really robust management practices that you would see in terms of, setting the vision and the strategy, what are the enterprise capabilities we need to be successful, what then are sort of our goals and priorities, how does that flow into incentives and rewards, how do we measure and monitor, like what's sort of the operating model and sort of the rhythm of the business. I think the establishment of that is what we're going through right now, right? And so really sort of focused on how do we bring together sort of all of these elements so that there's cohesion, so that employees have predictability about, you know, what's sort of happening next. And so, yeah, I guess that's what I would focus on.
I mean, before I get to you, Sid, you both talked about, you know, transparency and clarity of purpose and on. So how is it actually structured? Is it in the process of being structured? Do you have like virtual meet? I mean, how is it being done? Just top level.
Yes, I mean, we think about strategy as a process, right? And so it's,
good.
you know, I think it's easy to think about sort of the launch of the strategy as an event, right? We think about it as the first step of the process in sort of that overall system of how we're going to sort of operate the business, right? And so at every step of sort of the, you know, sort of the rhythm that I just talked about, we're very deliberate about, you know, exactly what you talked about, sort of the transparency in the launch of the strategy, defining the capabilities that every organization is going to pursue to enable their success. Right now, we're actually in the middle of our goals cascade, so that's a very structured process where we go through functional goal setting and have a very deliberate time-bound sort of cascade through which we all ladder up, right? And so I think just being very intentional about sort of how those systems come together is actually what we're in the middle of right now.
Yeah, I'll build on that as well. I feel like the most overused word is strategy or transformation these days, right? So one thing that I think we have done is what is not important. So, you know, we all talk about what is important. So one of the things, not only a CEO, but every leader under them has said, we have deprioritized these things either for the time being or forever. And that's been communicated to the organization, which are not always popular decisions, but it drives clarity, right? So I think that's the first thing. There's cascading.
How is it communicated? Like through
So it's
literature?
communicated in different forums. It's communicated, so we have obviously employee all hands, so it was first communicated there. We have what we sort of call our senior leader forum. It's communicated there, and then they are asked to communicate to their teams and own it, right? So one of the shifts we are doing as HR leaders is when we do these big shifts from HR, they are not HR shifts. This is business shifts. And the onus is not on HR. We'll be enablers, but the business leaders need to own this transformation and change. And so the onus is also on them to cascade this down, right? So it's happening through very different forums, all the way up from to C-suite, all the way down to ICs.
Thank you. Sid? you
Okay,
want-
so I think what I'm going to share, I think is pretty much most of you probably do it today, is a simple way of like continuous learning, right? Where you let people have those conversations with managers and you make it a structure, right? Every quarter, what's important for managers to realize is that it's not your regular one-on-ones. Having those career conversations with people, right? Having that authentic career conversations where it's a two-way, where employees can ask managers about things that they want the managers to improve on as well, right? Because it's always one way, top down, it doesn't work for us. And when we are training managers to have those career conversations, those conversations happen quarterly, and the focus of those meetings have become more important than large annual feedbacks, right? Because people shy away from annual appraisals, don't like it, right? Like with these big notes to write about what you did the entire year. But having those career conversations builds in the transparency that everybody talked about here, right? As well as bringing the ownership on managers to be able to kind of have the conversations. It may be difficult too, because there might not be all the options that an employee wants in the company, but having that conversation, exploring options together really helps building that trust in these relationships.
That's great.
Carol?
Me? So I'm going to take a tack here, you know, kind of different in smaller company, I guess. So I have my head of employee success right now running around having roundtables with all the employees in small groups to try and get actual feedback on the programs that we're putting forward. And I find that surprisingly to be something that's a bit novel, but it's very worthwhile. And so what comes from that is to understand, are you providing the benefits that people want? Is there something missing? Are there glaring things that the company has missed, which we all know that eventually you get to an employee survey and you find things. But what it does is build trust, and it builds a bond to be able to have the faces of the people who can actually affect change for the employees. And that works really well. I've done that before. It takes a lot of time. They're having about 20 sessions around the world with different people in different languages. But what comes from that is really almost a consultative kind of presentation back to the ELT about, or executive leadership about, you know, what's working, what's not working, and where we might want to course correct so that we get the culture that we're looking for. The other thing we're going to do, and some may gasp, we're going to kick this off on Monday, but we have in the past, and I'm going to do it again, systematically actually given every person's name out and said, if you had 10 chits to give, saying positive things about someone and negative about them, you don't have to use them, but if you want to, this is your time. So if you want to give constructive criticism, it's going to be data-based, anonymized, consolidated, and given back to that person. That is fantastic as a way to pulse employees, but a way to make them feel, if the person next to them isn't performing, that they had an outlet to actually say, somehow there's favoritism, somehow something's going on, but things aren't changing, and we can get better if this person gets the feedback. That takes a lot of effort too, but it's a wonderful thing to actually tackle. And behind it all, as we keep saying, all four of us keep coming back saying trust is where we're trying to get to. Both of those are ways to build trust with the employees and to make them feel heard.
Thank you. Before we get to the trust issue, which I know you're all dying to speak on, I want to just talk a little bit about, and maybe each of you have a different challenge. What is the biggest challenge, would you say, that you are facing when you're trying to implement and do things around your key driver? Sid?
Yeah, I can start first. I think for us, so just a quick background of the company.
Yep.
It's the first India-based SaaS company that went IPO in the US. So you can imagine, and not just India in the sense of a big city in India, it was a small city in India that sort of really got this very big. So a lot of people, I think, that were in the company came from a background of like, this is their first big job, and it went bigger than they could imagine, right? And we are on the opposite side of what outsourcing did to culture 20 years ago, right? So as of an IPO, the leadership swapped to everybody here. All the senior execs are in the US now, a global company. With that, our biggest challenge, I believe, is defining who are we now. It was almost a company that, you know, about 10 years ago was the people who had a chip on their shoulder. They were not tier 1 or tier 2 schools. They came from, you know, humble backgrounds, built this company and made this a global brand. Now, how do you build this as like, okay, now we are here, we belong. And what does that mean, and how what changes and what you preserve is our biggest challenge and opportunity. And right now we are having some really interesting conversation about our values and what does that do to our culture moving forward. So that's a little hot topic for us.
That's great. We'll come back to the trust after the others have had their say.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I feel like we have so many parallels, right? I mean, I think we're going through sort of a similar transformation. And, you know, I think one of the biggest challenges we face is sort of accountability, right? And I don't mean accountability as in you don't want, you know, employees don't want to do the right thing or they don't want to do the work, but, you know, really sort of building like a thinking culture, right? I think we've become a little bit accustomed, and what you see in sort of the day-to-day is, well, tell me what I need to do and I'll go do it, right? And ultimately, you know, I think that impedes our pace, right? And I think what we're trying to sort of engender is like a little bit more of a risk tolerance around, you know, experimentation, around let's put out a perspective and see what the response is versus trying to build consensus, right? I think just trying to more so sort of adapt with speed. And so really trying to say, hold on a minute, like what are we trying to accomplish here? What's my role in it? What do I think about the path forward, right? Which everything we talked about engagement just I think ultimately drives greater commitment, you know, Carol, to your point around getting employees engaged in the conversation. And so I think, you know, that's a different muscle for us, you know, versus sort of a bit more of either sort of a lack of clarity or, you know, we'll tell you what to do and then you can go do it, and really sort of saying, right, so what are you bringing to the table in terms of your perspective as to how we're going to advance the work in service to the strategy. And that's just a different muscle. That's a different, you know, here and now versus what am I going to do in the future. And so we're learning through that.
That's great. Sid?
Okay. For us, I think, again, a large company, you know, a challenge that a lot of you probably have seen in your companies too, is the multi-generational, multicultural, and multi-regional, right? You know, like everything entwined together. We call it, like for the generations part, we call it, what do you call it? Generations of leadership, right? GLOW, right? This is one of our areas where we focus on. right? So basically, all of that comes together. It's not one-dimensional, it's three-dimensional that we need to continue to kind of work with to figure out how is it that we have to have different strokes for different folks, as you call it, right, in terms of keeping that engagement going.
Sure. Thank you.
So for me, I always say that about 90% of my job is spent on communication issues.